Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Fanfic Series 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto returned to Konoha with a broken heart and built a harem with Sakura. Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The Nara residence usually was a quiet place as long as Nara Yoshino, Shikamaru's mother, was not disturbed, as Shikamaru refers to it from time to time. Today however was different as Shikamaru had an unexpected and generally unwelcomed guest in Shikamaru's book over. Why do you insist on torturing me? Shikamaru groaned as he moved his piece on the shogi board. The opposition gave a snicker. Since when was playing a game of shogi considered torture? Oh, it's because you know you're going to lose, isn't it? Said the amused voice from Tamari from the other side of the board. Laughably against her words though, she scratched her scowl-bearing head while trying to determine her next move. Shikamaru would have snorted if he wasn't so lazy. Playing a game of shogi with you is the torture part. Tamari gave a sadistic smirk unfazed by the insult. Hee, I see how it is then. Don't sweat it, I will put you out of your misery soon then, if you don't give up like you always do. She hissed teasingly, as she moved her piece, only to blink when Shikamaru moved his piece a split second after her move. So he saw my plan there too. While the pair played the game, Shikamaru couldn't help but ask in interest, so what is it like? Tamari raised an eyebrow then understood his question and grinned, oh I don't know, maybe you should become a Junin too and see what it is like. She replied almost like bait. Shikamaru ran a hand through his hair, it would be troublesome. Yeah I know. Tamari said dismissively, almost with a slight trace of disappointment in her voice, while shaking her head, sounds like the dim wit I know as Shikamaru. She mumbled, you could be so much better, but you're too lazy for your own good. She mused as she made her next move. Check, she announced, causing the silent Nara Shikaku to turn his head and give a brief glance of interest, before shaking his head in disapproval then returning his attention to the dishes his wife appointed him to. Shikamaru sighed, I was about to say, it would be troublesome, but I will consider it. Tamari widened her eyes but Shikamaru then added with a smirk, but since you think it's too troublesome, I guess I won't bother. Tamari's left eye began to violently twitch in annoyance, why you little. Tamari released her anger with an almost growl-like grunt which Shikamaru snickered at then moved his piece. Tamari gleamed at his knight shifting for the opening she was waiting for. Now I got you. She bolted to her piece and announced loudly and proudly while almost slamming the piece down on the board, checkmate Shikamaru. Shikaku didn't show any interest but internally he snickered, while whistling innocently. You will regret that Shikamaru. Shikamaru shrugged, uncaring of his defeat, oh well, good game. He offered his hand but held it in empty air, when he suddenly felt like a type of specimen under a microscope from Tamari's highly suspicious gaze. Shikamaru had no idea how long he was under that microscope for, but he almost jumped out of his skin when Tamari gave an evil smirk, best out of two. Shikamaru's sweat dropped, but you whoa. I know, maybe we should see if it wasn't a fluke. She interrupted in a chirp, causing Shikamaru to groan in annoyance. What a troublesome woman, he internally growled, while Shikaku had to control his wide smile and chuckles from being audible. I warned you son a long time ago, women are not to be treated like fools. He internally chuckled, as Tamari, and unwillingly, Shikamaru prepared the board for a second game. Care for a drink of tea, Tamari? Shikaku asked, almost too cheerfully for Shikamaru's liking. Tamari turned and nodded, yes please, that would be great, Shikaku-san. Shikamaru's eye twitched at her almost bipolar attitude to how she treats everybody else but him. Only polite when you are being given something, hey, how typical. Since Shikamaru was stuck in yet another game, he decided to continue their conversation, so how is Gaara? He asked in interest. Tamari chuckled, well, you might not be able to call him that so freely anymore Shikamaru. Shikamaru's eyes widened, so he was. He trailed off as Tamari gave a happy nod as she smiled proudly for her little brother. Ah, he is now the new Cage, or the Godime Cage to be precise. She said with her voice full of pride. Shikamaru gave a genuine grin, which was rare for him, you seem to sound quite glad. Tamari nodded again. After all the chaos we have been through to get there, yes I am more than glad and proud of my little brother. She responded in very unnatural softness. Shikaku gave Tamari her tea. Please allow me to say congratulations to not only your promotion, but to the new Cage-sama too. Shikaku said respectfully. Tamari accepted the tea and gave a wide smile. Thank you Shikaku-san, I will pass the message on when I return to Suna. Shikaku then resumed his task. Shikamaru then said plainly, so that was the reason why you are here in Konoha then, to announce to Hokage-sama the new Cage-sama, which means you are the new chosen liaison between our countries. Tamari gave a feigned gasp of surprise. Oh no, really? She teased but took a sip of her drink, then responded in a less joking manner. More or less yes, that is the reason why I am here in Konoha. Shikamaru then raised an eyebrow while he moved his new piece. So what has coming here have to do with your mission? He said in suspicion. Tamari glared. Oh, so I can't come by and see an annoying and lazy person I call a friend, now. She huffed in annoyance. Shikamaru groaned, but he knew what she was doing very easily. Trying to make me apologize won't work. Well, I mean that shouldn't you report to Hoka? Tamari loud sigh interrupted Shikamaru's scold. As she stood up, I best get going then, I must say goodbye to Yoshino-san first. She said way too innocently to reveal the true evil intentions behind it. Shikamaru scoffed at her poker face. It's a bluff. Temari's eyebrow perked when Shikamaru just stared dumbly at her as if not threatened. That was until she called out innocently, Yoshino-san. Shikamaru widened his eyes in alarm. If there was one force on earth he never wanted to face, it was the scolding shouts of that woman. Oh, wait, he half shouted with satisfying panic to Tamari, as he gritted his teeth in annoyance. Curse you, woman. Quote. I am sorry, that is not what I meant. It is nice for you to visit every time you come to Konoha. He slurred, trying to suppress his sarcasm as much as possible. Tamari sat back down with a satisfied smirk across her features at her victory. Oh well, maybe I might stay a while then. She announced as if nothing happened. Tamari then added more seriously, I gave the report and announcement to Hokage-sama before I came by. Since I got here ahead of schedule, I have time to kill. I do put my duties first. Shikamaru nodded in acceptance. I wasn't accusing anybody. Tamari scoffed. Sure you weren't, if I am bothering you though. As troublesome as you are, I meant what I said, stay as long as you like. Tamari blinked in partial surprise but smiled while drinking her tea. Shikamaru sighed. How you are 18 is a mystery to me, you act like a child. He muttered, only to hear choked laughter. How you are only 15 is a mystery to me, you act like an old grouch. Shikamaru was about to rebut, until he heard a knock at the door which his mother answered and announced, there is an ANBU here to see you, Shikamaru. Shikamaru excused himself then came back moments later and sighed. Mission? Tamari asked, dropping her playful tone. Shikamaru nodded, I am to report to Hokage-sama right away. He said while he yawned. Tamari nodded while standing and placing her fan on her back, then I best be off then. Thank you again for your hospitality, Shikaku-san. Shikaku gave a nod in her direction. You're always welcome, Tamari. He said as he continued washing the dishes. Tamari and Shikamaru soon left and met the cross path in their journey. I suppose I will see you the next time you decide to drop in. Shikamaru said sarcastically. Tamari grinned. Probably, but who knows, you might actually stop by and see me in Suna. You know that we are hosting the next Chunin exams. Shikamaru blinked in surprise, but we just finished this round's one. The village leaders sure don't waste time, do they? Tamari nodded. It was part of our agreement with Konoha for this round's exams. Konoha hosted this one, we are hosting the next one. Tamari continued after a brief pause. I will be moving back and forth between Suna and Konoha for the next months in preparation. Hokage-sama tells me I will need a guide since I am Suna's ambassador. Shikamaru emitted a groan. I see where this is going. Tamari sighed in a huff at his familiar lazy antics. I will ask Sumbo. It is a pain, but sure, why not? Tamari blinked in surprise and then smiled. Hey, you're not as lazy as I thought, thanks Shikamaru. Shikamaru lazily threw his hand dismissively from his side, just try not to be too troublesome. Tamari laughed and shook her head at his antics. Best of luck on your mission, Shikamaru. Shikamaru nodded but couldn't respond as Tamari said more seriously, consider what I said earlier, Shikamaru. You could easily become a Junin if you at least try and stop complaining. Shikamaru ran a hand through his hair. What a pain. I will think about it. Lee unconsciously fiddled with his new vest that he just put on when this morning. Lee smirked wide in the mirror at his new addition to his attire, a forest green Chunin vest. The vest was zipped up, making it the only real difference from somebody mistaking him of being his sensei other than the decreasing height difference. Lee then exited his apartment and ran to the training field, where Guy and the others were waiting for a new mission they were planning to take. This time though Lee had a big surprise in stock for them. Within minutes, Lee had made it to the training grounds and spotted his older clone Guy. Nearby was Neji, who was waiting impatiently but held a smug grin, as well as Tenten, who was twisting a kunai in her hand. Lee was about to make his presence known, but Neji beat him to it. Congratulations on your promotion, Lee, now you're only one rank behind me now, instead of two. He announced smugly with a wider smirk as he didn't open his eyes. Tenten dropped her kunai in surprise and gave a wide smile. Congratulations, Lee, all that training we did was worth it in the end. Lee gave a wide nice guy pose as his eyes became slightly teary, but he didn't sniffle. It is all thanks to you helping me in my training. Lee beamed proudly. Guy still hadn't noticed. Instead he was mumbling something about eternal rivalry and rematch. Tenten tapped Guy on the shoulder to get his attention. Guy-sensei. Guy turned in question and froze in shock at his miniature's appearance. Within moments Guy's agape mouth formed to a wide sparkling toothy smile. Congratulations on making Chunin, Lee. That is what I expect from my youthful student. Guy beamed at his younger clone giving off his nice guy pose, only to notice his student was suddenly too excited and in his own world, completely ignoring him in the process. Guy couldn't completely work out what Lee was crying out loud, but the constant spinning around in a circle on the spot was beginning to make his stomach follow the same motion. Leah, Guy muttered in a futile attempt to calm his student down. Guy tried several times until he knew what he had to do. Result to the traditional way he silenced his student all the time, shut up and listen to me. Guy roared while delivering a swift and bone-cracking punch to the ecstatic Lee's face, knocking the newly appointed Chunin right into the tree. Lee quickly recomposed himself and gave Guy his complete attention. I'm sorry Guy-sensei. Guy gave another tooth-wide smile. Congratulations again Lee. Lee rubbed his runny eyes. Thank you, Guy-sensei. Lee said through his tears of joy. Guy then narrowed his eyes in thought. I guess I have to highlight his new responsibilities like I told Neji and Tenten when they got promoted. He concluded then started talking only to be interrupted before he could form one word by Lee. So do we get to go on a new mission now Guy-sensei? No or shall we celebrate at a restaurant? No or shall we? Lee received another bone-crushing punch by Guy, then quickly recovered. Sorry Guy-sensei. Guy sighed. As I was saying, as I am sure your youthful intellect recalls what I said to Neji when he got promoted, as a Chunin, there's a high chance of you now being assigned missions with other shinobi other than me, Tenten, or Neji. Becoming a Chunin also requires great responsibility, which is why I am lifting my restrictions on your use of removing your weights, and performing the lotus. Lee averted his eyes to the ground looking deep in thought for a moment, then returning his gaze up at his sensei with a look of confusion. But Guy-sensei, when will I know when to use the lotus or even release the gates? Guy thought he needed a more direct approach. He resting a supportive hand on his puzzled student's shoulder and answered again. Lee, what I am saying is it will be your responsibility to decide when to perform your jutsus. Only when the moment is right will you know what to do. A feminine sigh was heard from the side of the two spandex-wearing clones. Nay, Guy-sensei, that doesn't really answer La. Tenten was cut off by a hand placed on her shoulder making her cut off her statement midway. Let it go Tenten, she heard Neji mutter through his long and bored sigh. Tenten looked back at the pair in front of her and Neji, and her eyes widened first in shock but then quickly narrowed. Why did I bother? She whispered more to herself than anyone in particular. The cause to this was when she noticed the furiously nodding and concentrated face of Lee, as he was scribbling down in what was now being referred to as that notepad. Guy waited until his student finished his note-taking, and was given the signal by Lee's fixed gaze to continue. There is also the matter Lee that I am no longer officially your sensei. The sound of a pencil landing on the soft grass was heard, as Guy painfully willed himself to not break his hard stare at his now former student. Lee's entire body was stiff, and his muscles were tense. The slowly molding sad expression on the noble blue beast's face was enough to push Guy to continue before he burst into tears. However, that does not mean we cannot continue to take missions together as our old team, nor does it mean I will refuse to continue your training. Guy's cheer-up response seemed to work, as Lee pulled an unimaginably quick 180. Guy-sensei, Lee, Guy-sensei, Lee. The two embraced themselves as they continued their disturbing shouting match. The other members of Team Guy's sweat dropped. You would think after 3 years of seeing this I would eventually get used to Ida, Tenten muttered dryly. Unfortunately Tenten, this is one thing that no matter how hard you try, you cannot change fate, that this will continue to disturb us for the rest of our lives. Tenten's sweat dropped even further at Neji's fate speech. I tend to agree. After what seemed like an eternity for Neji and Tenten, they were relieved of their sensei's and teammates' disturbing antics by the pair finally coming apart. Lee still had a few traces of tears along his face however. Now, Guy shouted after recomposing himself and continuing, let's go report to Hokage-sama for our first high-rank mission now that we are all above Genin rank. Hi Guy-sensei, come Neji and Tenten, if we do not make it to the Hokage's tower in less than 10 minutes we will have to run 30 laps around Kono. I refuse, Neji barked, derailing Lee from finishing his statement. The Konoha hospital was always a place where there was work to be done and never enough staff at hand. The waiting rooms rarely had a vacant seat at the clinic, its seats full of both civilian and shinobi alike, although most shinobi that entered never stayed long in its walls. It appeared to be a trend for most of the shinobi situated at the hospital to leave, cursing the generally cream-colored building and praying to not return. The double doors opened to reveal the three young genins Moegi, Udon and a smirking Konohamaru. The trio each had replaced their signature goggles with their unscratched forehead protectors. Konohamaru walked through the main waiting room with the other two trailing behind him, as they walked down a path they were used to traveling down often. Turning to a door, Konohamaru knocked, resulting in hearing a female's "coming" call from the other side. Within moments the door was opened to reveal a kunoichi with bubblegum pink hair wearing a red vest and a black skirt. She grinned at her guests, "Konohamaru, Moegi-chan, and Udon, I told you to stop coming in my working hours." Sakura-ni-chan did say that to us, Konohamaru, Udon stated in his blocked nose-like voice that still hadn't changed. The young Sarutobi ignored his teammate. "Of course I remember, but you said we could come if it was important, Sakura-ni-chan." "Oh, we wanted to tell you about our mission." Sakura shook her head with a smile, and closed the door behind her. How much of an idiot did he make himself, Moegi-chan? The orange-haired girl chuckled in result, ignoring Konohamaru's pleading eyes to not say anything. He got mauled by a daimyo's cat, Sakura-ni-chan. His shoulders slumped as everybody laughed at his gritted teeth cringe. "Stupid cat." Sakura shook her head in recollection, following Naruto's footsteps. "I see. You had the same mission, Sakura-ni-chan." Sakura nodded her head at Moegi while walking to a door that led them to a small yard in the middle of the hospital. Sakura was getting used to her small fan club, as she called them, that basically made her their boss, since Naruto was still not expected to return to Konoha until 6 months later. The thought of her teammate made her sigh. Naruto. The memory of what she read that day in Tsunade's office was still fresh as ever in her mind, since she thought about him on a regular basis. Arguably as much as her other teammate, who was not here but for a very different reason. While she wanted to talk about what she read to somebody, a part of her resisted the urge. If Naruto never told Sasuke and herself during their time as Team 7, it was obvious that Naruto wanted to keep it a secret. She had two conflicting beliefs though. One understood why he wanted to not say anything and could respect his choice. The other, however, like an opposing contrast, was enraged that he didn't trust them. Time brewing over these thoughts had made her arguments back and forth develop as one being the winner, but the following day, the victor would be countered, resulting in an indecisive loop. One thing did make sense to her though. She desperately wanted to see his wide smile again, to the point where she was counting down the months remaining like a New Year's Eve. "Something wrong, Sakura-ni-chan?" Konohamaru asked, while the other two looked as well in slight concern at her deep-thought appearance. She shook her thoughts off and smiled. "I just remembered, we had that mission several times in a row. Oh good God, I think I am going to kill that cat if that happens to us." Sakura laughed at the familiar saying, but it was missing the "dadbeo." Naruto said the same thing too. 6 months left. I wonder how you have been going, Naruto. Tsunade groaned at the pile of paperwork towering before her. If there was one thing she would never let Jiraiya hear the end of about his insistence that she took this job instead of him, it was about the endless paperwork. She could swear that he secretly knew about this little addition to the job, which was why he was so persistent about it. She would make him pay for it the next time she saw him. Deciding to put her evil schemes on hold, she returned to her current task and groaned in annoyance. She wondered if she released some killer intent that maybe the little thin pieces of papers would quiver away in fear. Although the temptation to then deliver her threat would be exceedingly great if it didn't work. She tried hopeless anyway, but to her displeasure, the towers of paper didn't budge, the inanimate objects not even intimidated by her thoughts. Before Tsunade could muster up another scheme, her door was kicked open by an alert and kunai-wielding Nara Shikamaru. Shikamaru quickly glanced left and right in the office before turning his attention to the Hokage. "Is everything alright in here, Hokage-sama? I felt some killer intent coming from your office and Asameda." Shikamaru trailed off, as he put away his kunai and returned to his usual lazy stance, although his questioning face remained. Tsunade sighed. Usually she wouldn't go as far as tell the truth, but considering she was tired, still under the influence of her sake, and the fact being it was Shikamaru of all people, she figured why not. "I was wondering if these papers would disappear if they felt my killer intent, but obviously as you can see," she said dryly, waving her hand in the direction of the buildings of papers, "they are still here." How troublesome," Shikamaru said, returning to his usual neutral and non-interested figure. "Although it is not my place to say, Hokage-sama, you could assign your apprentices parts of the paperwork as well." Considering that, Shikamaru pointed at what could be described as the Empire State Building of the paper stacks, is the hospital reports and medical supply inventory requests. Tsunade didn't say anything at first and blinked a couple of times. "Why didn't I think of that?" Her mind scolded. Of course she wasn't willing to allow herself to be humiliated twice in front of Shikamaru within a span of 20 seconds of him entering the room, at least not directly. Of course I know about that Shikamaru, but if you will just wait there for 1 minute, Shizune. Within a matter of seconds Shizune came running in. Yes Tsunade-sama. You see that very large pile over there? Tsunade waved lazily at the direction of the paper tower of towers her sake-induced mind was beginning to nickname. Shizune gave a quick glance, then returned to Tsunade's serious gaze, although the sudden paleness meant Shizune knew what was coming next. Why yes Tsunade-sama, Shizune said in a surprisingly pleading-like tone. Even though Tsunade was washed over with a feeling of guilt, she didn't drop her usual official Hokage tone. Take those reports and go through them together with Sakura. If there is anything that requires my attention, bring it to me immediately. Hi Tsunade-sama, I will go find Sakura to help me carry the reports out of here. Shizune whimpered in defeat. Tsunade gave in with a sigh. Afterwards, tell Sakura she can have the rest of the week off, as well as yourself on a small paid leave. Tsunade said, giving a soft smile to her longtime friend and apprentice. Thank you Tsunade-sama. Shizune said in a more brightened mood, giving a quick bow, then excusing herself from the office, closing the door softly. Meanwhile the seemingly invisible Shikamaru stepped back from his retreated corner with clearly an amused expression across his face, but being it was too troublesome to tease, especially the Hokage, he chose not to say anything. What do you have to report? Tsunade asked, feigning innocence. Shikamaru blinked blankly. You asked to see me about a mission you wanted me to lead. Ona, you sent an Anbu to my door. Shikamaru mumbled over a yawn, while a part of him questioned how she didn't remember. Tsunade put aside his lazy attitude, since she was long used to it by now, and as much as she scrutinized the shadow user, she could admit he did do his job. Ah yes, that's right, but before that, I assume Tamari has already asked you about being her guide. Shikamaru sighed and nodded. I accept the role. Tsunade nodded. Good, I would have forced you anyway. Now, I had that mission paper. Tsunade dragged herself up from her desk and began flicking through the buildings of paper, giving off an occasion curse as she went back and forth between the piles. Here, she shouted triumphantly, as she pulled out a fine paper from the pile. What Tsunade did not expect was the paper towers striking revenge by the piles scattering apart on her office floor in a chain reaction. Quote. I deem you worthy an opponent of a Sanin. Tsunade was screaming in her mind, crushing the mission paper in her hand, while giving a death-inducing glare at the scattered papers on the floor, clearly oblivious to the mumbled, troublesome, from Shikamaru behind her. Sensing the killer intent rising from the silent women, he had to think fast before the situation was going to become a hassle and possibly dangerous for his well-being. This looks like a perfect opportunity for a newly appointed genin team that are eager for a D-rank mission. Shikamaru said in an out-of-character-like enthusiasm, secretly praying Tsunade would buy it. Tsunade gave one more glare at the papers before stomping back to her desk. Sounds like a good idea. Tsunade grunted, although she was secretly scheming for a mixture of sake and a basic kaiden, knowing that the combination made one very satisfying fire. Tsunade cleared her throat and stifled those thoughts until she got this over with. Now your Mishina, so this is the bridge that the Gaki and his team fought to protect. Hey. Jiraiya mused, while the Sannin and Naruto walked across the cement bridge. Naruto had a large smile fixed to his face. They really named the bridge after me. Jiraiya rolled his eyes. You were bitching 5 minutes ago that you didn't get a symbol like your other teammates did, and now you let that fact sink in. I worry about you Gaki. Naruto ignored the Sannin's words, as he waved at people passing by, who were staring at him agape as if they had just seen a celebrity. So it appears that he is famous here. As if the powers that be had heard Jiraiya musing, a rush of people swamped over them in the dozens. Naruto was shocked at the sudden bombardment of cheers and pens flying demanding his autograph. The blonde's fox-wide smile never left his face as he signed his messy signature in notepads and photos of the old Team 7. Somebody is popular. No. Jiraiya stated at the ecstatic blonde, who was finally free from the rapid fans. Hell yeah, I'm awesome. Don't let it get to your head, idiot. Remember why we are here. Naruto frowned but nodded. Yosha, let's go. Jiraiya perked an eyebrow at his student's sudden silence. What's the matter Gaki? Naruto was fully agape as he looked around at the town, not recognizing it in the slightest. The old and stale-colored buildings were either gone with new ones, or the old ones had a fresh coating of new paint thrown over them after extensive renovations. There also were more streets than the blonde remembered, hinting that the place had grown in size over time. What almost brought a tear to his eye though were the people that were buzzing along the streets. The most significant change off the bat was the sheer number of people in comparison to the beggar-filled streets of before. Seeing their faces made his agape expression point upwards, as the pained frowns and cringes from before were no longer worn. He was able to depict their wealth as well via their clean and new clothing, which bloomed with vibrant colors compared to the dark colors from before. Was this really the wave they had saved so long ago? Naruto ignored Jiraiya's calls and ran down the familiar streets they traveled down back then, the agape smile never leaving his features. The blonde was once again greeted by smiles from people that recognized him, which to his surprise was almost everybody that laid eye on him. He didn't even know them in person, yet they knew him. Recognition was something the blonde had longed for in Konoha, but seeing so many faces flying into his gaze made a tear of joy run down his face. Was this overwhelming warmth what acceptance really felt like? Naruto Nichan. The blonde's ears perked at the voice, and looked over his shoulder to see a face he could have sworn was familiar to him. It was the face of a young boy, with black hair and eyes Naruto remembered held little life in them long ago, and then it clicked to his shock. Nari. The boy smiled at his stuttered words, it's okay to cry when you're happy you know. Naruto chuckled wiping his tears of joy away, oh shut up. That was my line to you. How have you been Naruto Nichan? Good Inari, how about yourself? You're getting pretty tall now. Hehe. Not as tall as you have grown it seems. Nay. Naruto frowned at the chuckling Inari, who was roughly 2 feet shorter than Naruto. Ahem. The sound of an annoyed Sanin came over the top of their voices, as both turned to see awaiting impatiently Jiraiya. Ero Senin. Inari raised an eyebrow at the name, who is he Naruto Nichan? He's an old pervert. Gaki. Jiraiya swore, when this mission was over, he was going to give his student a lesson in manners. I1/4. What's the matter Kakashi? Are you afraid that my overpowering vibrancy of youth is too much for you to handle in a little rematch of our last challenge in eternal rivalry? Guy said giving his trademark sparkling grin. Did you say something Guy? Kakashi said drifting his only visible eye from his book for a moment before continuing reading. Guy you are so hip. That is why you are my rival Hatake Kakashi. Guy screamed digging his hands into his surprisingly shiny black hair. Why does it always have to turn out like this? Whatever happened to going to get a mission? Tenten said, clearly annoyed and already bored of the so-called rematch. Neji chose to not say anything, but it was obvious he was agreeing. It seems Guy-sensei might not win this time, said Lee, unconsciously shaking in excitement at the rivals' match. Tenten face-palmed herself and groaned, Lee, they haven't even started yet. Before Lee could give his response an Anbu member appeared in front of them, blocking the view of Kakashi and Guy. Rock Lee, the muffled masculine voice behind the bird mask asked. Hi, Lee said, giving the messenger his complete attention. Hokage-sama wishes to speak to you in her office immediately regarding a new mission. And after that, the Anbu performed a seal and shunshined away. Tenten learnt from years of working together with Lee that standing next to him when an announcement like this was suddenly given, it was best to get away from him since the last time she didn't resulted in a ringing in her ears which lasted several hours. She barely made it in time as she almost seemed to jump a few feet away from Lee's shout, HAWWW. Hokage-sama wishes to speak to me about a new mission. He shouted waving his fist in front of his face as if he was addressing someone to a fight. Excellent work Lee, now don't keep Hokage-sama waiting, go. And remember what I said to you earlier. Guy shouted out at near equal volume, giving his nice guy gesture. Hi Guy-sensei, Lee said and took off towards the Hokage tower, leaving behind a trail of dust in his path. Guy then turned back to face his rival. Now where were we my Arca? Before Guy could finish his sentence, he noticed that Kakashi wasn't in front of him anymore. Tenten face-palmed yet again, he left when you started shouting Guy-sensei. She muffled through her hand. Guy started shaking, with his fists clenched, so it's a match of hide and seek is it Kakashi? Guy screamed out that caused villagers within a kilometer radius to turn their head in Guy's direction. Alright, if I cannot find you by sunset Kakashi, I will clean up the entire marketplace with my teeth. Had this been any other time, Neji would have his jaw hitting the ground in disbelief in such a stupid announcement, but spending over 3 years with Guy taught him to look underneath the underneath, so to speak with this situation and he discovered one thing. What a troublesome imbecile. Tenten couldn't help but chuckle at the saying coming from her usual silent teammate, isn't that something Shikamaru would say? Shizune sighed as she entered the hospital and walked to Sakura's office. Something told her that this was not going to be a fun little job, not as if she would need to speculate. Tsunade usually was asking for assistance from either herself or Sakura most of the time anyway. Reaching Sakura's office, she knocked and waited, only for no response to come after several moments. She tried again and tried the door, only to find it was locked. Maybe Sakura called in sick. Turning to leave, she then spotted who she was looking for through the window. Sakura was in a deep discussion with Moegi, while Konohamaru looked like he was trying something, while Udon sat back and showed his disapproval. It brought a smile to Shizune as she walked to the entrance and opened the door to let herself out. Now being able to hear what was going on, she shook her head while chuckling, watch Sakura Nichan. This time I will create half a dozen cage buncheons. Oh, at least we are in the hospital then for when you faint, you baka. Sakura-ni-chan. Shizune's laughter got the others' heads to turn, Konohamaru still going at that again as he Sakura. Hi, I swear he is Naruto the second. Ignoring Konohamaru's pout, Sakura addressed Shizune, what do you need Shizune-senpai? Shizune's delight disappeared with a frown, Tsunade-sama needs our help for some reports. If she wasn't also suffering the same fate, she would see the comedy behind how instant of a dissatisfied groan escaped through Sakura's forming cringe. How many? The medical reports. A second groan escaped, while the mutter of, not again, was whispered through it, give me one moment Shizune-senpai. Shizune nodded quizzically, as Sakura quickly returned to her discussion with the displeased Moegi. Now Moegi-chan, if you are serious I will be more than happy to help you. I am not as good as Tsunade-sama or Shizune-senpai though, so you will have to put up with me. Moegi didn't seem fazed though with a wide smile, you mean it's Sakura-ni-chan? Of course I do. Shizune smiled at Sakura's surprised expression when the genin hugged her saying thanks like a broken record, but soon she recovered and returned the gesture. I wonder what Sakura agreed to. Breaking apart Sakura chuckled, follow me, I will get you started right away. The genin only went agape, but Shizune could easily determine how happy she was. Saying goodbye to Udon and snickering at Konohamaru, who was spinning dizzy after creating 4 cage buncheons, the 3 kunoichi re-entered the building. Shizune decided to halt her question for later, as Sakura quickly went into her office and came out with a medical book Shizune recalled herself reading so long ago. This book discusses all about the body and how chakra works, you need to understand this first before we can do anything Moegi-chan. Hi Sakura-sensei. Shizune couldn't hold back the laughter as Sakura went red in the face. Don't call me that, you're only 3 years younger than me. She scolded, recovering from her embarrassment, she continued. I will test you on this later on, so make sure you know it well. Hi. Thank you again Sakura-sen. The eye twitch from Sakura hinted she shouldn't finish her statement and quickly corrected herself. I mean Sakura-ni-chan. Good, now go make sure that idiot Konohamaru is still conscious. The genin nodded her head and disappeared, holding the book as if it was a prized possession. Shizune then eyed the smiling Sakura and chuckled, Sakura-sensei. At the mention of the suffix, Sakura hissed, Shizune-senpai. So you want to fill me in on what you agreed to? Sakura rubbed her neck as she followed Shizune through the hospital. Moegi-chan asked me about learning medical jutsu. She told me she wants to be able to help Konohamaru and Udon when they are in trouble, which knowing Konohamaru, is very likely to happen. Shizune nodded with a proud smile, that was nice of you to accept teaching her. Sakura nodded while averting her gaze to her feet. She reminded me of myself. I couldn't refuse, however I am not exactly qualified as a professional medic nin, I hope I don't make a mess of it. Shizune raised an eyebrow at Sakura's fear. I am sure Moegi could find no better a person to ask for help. Don't put yourself down so much Sakura. Sakura sheepishly grinned, thanks Shizune-senpai. In memory of what Sakura mentioned before, Shizune decided to voice her thoughts, only 6 months until Naruto returns now hey Sakura. Shizune blinked at the sudden tenseness flicker across Sakura's body at mention of the blonde, but Sakura recovered with a neutral nod. Something wrong Sakura, he contains a biju within him, and he never told me. Yet regardless of that, he never treated me wrongly despite how I treated him. Nothing Shizune-senpai, she said simply, while continuing to walk towards the Hokage tower. Shizune gave it some thought and smiled, miss him? Shizune asked knowingly, although she was not aware of Sakura's real cause of her silent attitude. Sakura recalled the hyperactive blonde with his fox-like smile and formed one of her own, and answered the question in a different way from what she remembered. Ah, I really do miss him. To say Lee was excited was an understatement. He was being given his first mission as a Chunin, and the Hokage specifically requested him only from his team. While the thought of doing a mission alone gave Lee a bit of a scare at first, he also was overwhelmed with excitement. He would truly be able to make Gai-sensei proud when he completed his mission. Lee was so caught up in his thoughts that he did not see the moving tower of papers he was charging towards and collided with a loud crash, scattering the papers all around the hallway. Joining the papers was a slightly dazed Sakura from the collision. What the hell ran into me? Sakura quickly regained her composure on the floor and looked around agitated at all the papers she would have to pick up yet again from the mess in Tsunade's office. Sakura-san, I am so sorry. Lee spoke offering his hand to help her up. She accepted and extinguished her frustration with an agitated sigh. That's okay Lee-san, but please watch where you're going next time. Sakura said, her voice rising slightly at the end in annoyance. Here let me help, as a way to apologize. Lee said while rolling his sleeves. Sakura wasn't looking at Lee at the time. That's okay Lee-san I said it was all alright. She stopped and slightly gaped at what she saw. Lee was removing thick weights that were bound to his arms, placing them on the ground with a noticeable mini tremor that Sakura felt from her feet. Holy crap, just place your arms like this. Lee motioned his arms in a way suitable for carrying this many papers while continuing, and I'll repile them for you. It will only take a minute, any longer, and I will do 2,000 push-ups while balancing a stack of papers on my back. Sakura honestly didn't know what to say, but did as instructed and murmured a, thank you. Within not even a minute, or in Lee's mind, 57 seconds, all the papers were placed back in a pile in Sakura's grasp. Thank you, Lee-san, Sakura said, still astounded by the speed. It is a pity you cannot perform ninjutsu, Lee-san. You would honestly have a seal-forming speed that would make Kakashi-sensei look like a slouch. Sakura stated, giving a soft smile. It was then that she noticed the Chunin vest Lee was wearing. You're a Chunin now. That's great. Congratulations, Lee-san, Sakura said, giving a more widening smile. Lee was slightly embarrassed from the constant praising while placing back on his wrist weights. Thank you, Sakura-san. However, I feel I am the one who should be giving praise. You after all are the main reason I made it. Sakura almost dropped her papers when she saw Lee bow in respect. Thank you. Lee, unlike many of the others, failed the following Chunin exam, despite him making all the way to a draw in the final matchup. It was an unfair calling by the judge as to why Lee didn't pass. Tsunade offered him a chance to have a special case examination, which required him to complete missions to demonstrate his abilities to be given exemption from the first 2 exams. Sakura had been with him on every one of those missions, since Tsunade had assigned her as his examiner. You're welcome, Lee-san. What are you doing here anyway? I was just on my way actually to see Hokage-sama to receive my first MI. Lee cut off his talk when his eyes widened to a realization he now was running late. Oh no, I'm late. Sorry, Sakura-san, but I had better hurry. Sakura nodded, knowing very well how angry her sensei was when people were late. But before Lee could depart, Sakura looked once again at the now concealed weight wrist straps and her brain began to tick. Such speed like that was such a thing she desperately needed. Lee-san, please forgive me for asking, but when you come back from your mission, could you possibly give me a few recommendations on a starting set for those weight wrists? I would really appreciate that, since Kakashi-sensei has been telling me in spars that I desperately need to improve my speed. Lee gave his own miniature version of the nice guy pose. Absolutely, Sakura-san, but if I'm gone for too long, feel free to ask Guy-sensei, he knows much more than me. Sakura paled. While Lee was somewhat calm at times, Guy was downright crazy and personally freaked her out. Shaking her head, she quickly stuttered her reply. And no, it's fine, I'll wait for you to come back. Good luck on your mission, Lee-san. Lee waved and then continued his self-proclaimed race to Tsunade's office, leaving behind Sakura looking down at the papers in her hands and letting out a groan. Shikamaru sighed in his seat as Tsunade finished her briefing on the mission. This mission is probably going to be very troublesome. Considering he hasn't been in Konoha a long time, I will have to evaluate his newfound abilities if he has any new ones, that is. Tsunade nodded in agreement to Shikamaru's plan. That would be a smart thing to do indeed. According to the last letter I received, he has become very different than when he left the village. At this, Shikamaru snorted. I have a very hard time believing that. Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle. Before the conversation could continue, there was a loud knock at the door. Enter, Tsunade announced. The door opened, revealing Rock Lee. The expression on his face left Tsunade confused, but was soon answered by his quick bow. Apologies, Hokage-sama, on being late. I accidentally had a run-in with Sakura-san and helped her pick up some reports she had to fill out. It was my fault. Tsunade almost burst out laughing, but a small snicker was all that escaped. That's fine, Lee, although I must say I am very disappointed in our newly promoted Chunin, that he can't even be punctual for his first mission. That's above C rank as a Chunin. I thought your sensei was Guy, not Kakashi. Shikamaru couldn't help but smirk at the reaction Lee was giving from that clearly playful tease from Tsunade. Lee had noticeably paled and his eyes had gone wide. Before Lee could say anything, Tsunade had waved her hand dismissively and let out a light laugh. Don't worry, Lee, you're actually earlier than I expected. The run-in with Sakura is partly my fault anyway. Shikamaru was about to snicker but suppressed it when he felt Tsunade's glare upon himself. Lee was clearly confused by what was going on, but chose to not pursue it further. You wished to see me about a mission, Hokage-sama. Tsunade quickly went to her official Hokage act. Yes, I have picked you specifically for a special B rank mission. The rest of Team Guy is being assigned on another mission that doesn't require the full strength of a 4-man cell. Lee couldn't help but wonder what kind of mission his team was going on. Almost as if Tsunade heard his silent question, she responded, they are going on a C-rank scouting mission across the border of the Fire Country, where Neji's Byakugan will be most useful. Lee's mouth hung slightly open, but he quickly recovered himself. I see, but what about Tenten? She has more experience than me as a Chunin. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at his modesty. Oh. While that is true, she has been a chunin for over several months. I thought it would only be fair to give you a chance at a high-ranked mission, but if you want me to reconsider, I'm sure. And no. Sorry, Hokage-sama, please continue. Tsunade couldn't suppress the smirk on her face. So predictable, just like a certain Gaki. Her mind thought. Now where was I? Oh yes. We have received a mission from the Wave Country requesting for protection of their finally restored village. Lee looked down at the floor deep in thought, and then brought his gaze up looking at Tsunade, wondering if it was okay to ask a question. Judging by Tsunade waiting patiently for him to acknowledge, he asked away, isn't that the same country that Naruto-kun's team saved from Gato? Tsunade nodded. Indeed, since you seem to know about the mission, I assume you know the result of the mission. Lee pondered for a moment before nodding. Hi, Gato was killed by Momochi Zabuza, and his gang of thugs were chased out of the village from the rallied-up citizens. Impressed by the chunin's knowledge, Tsunade gave a small smile. Yes, that's right. However, Wave has been receiving threats again from Gato's organization. It appears somebody else has taken over. While we don't have any actual identification at the moment, we have his name or alias at least. He refers to himself as Osorioni, or Demon of Fear. It was then that Shikamaru decided to add his bit of information. Judging by this so-called alias, I am leading to numerous possibilities about the personality or traits of their new leader. The top three being he is either just a typical thug trying to intimidate people, or he is a skilled shinobi in the arts of sealing and or genjutsu. Why would he be sealing master or genjutsu specialist? Tsunade asked, raising an eyebrow at Shikamaru's theory. If I recall right, there are seals that can indeed be used to contact spirits to aid a shinobi in battle. Shikamaru hesitated slightly but continued. During the attack on Konoha, Sandaime used a forbidden seal to call forth the spirit called Shinigami, to devour a portion of Orochimaru's soul. Tsunade winced at the memory, but ushered Shikamaru to continue, in saying that, Orochimaru also used forbidden jutsus to revive the deceased previous Hokages. Following this, I don't see how it could be too far-fetched for there to be more spirits out there that can be summoned, and maybe this, Demon of Fear, is one of them. Shikamaru paused briefly, flickering a quick gaze between the two other people in the room, surprised to see that Lee was showing signs of understanding his theory. Maybe he underestimated the miniature guy's intelligence by placing him in comparison to a certain blonde knucklehead. He was more than interested when Lee decided to add his own input. Genjutsu would aid this person as well, since he would be able to fool people into believing they are seeing an actual demon when in actual fact it's nothing real. Both Tsunade and Shikamaru nodded. Tsunade fixed her gaze to Shikamaru. What is your third possible theory on this Demon of Fear's identity? Shikamaru sighed, scratching the back of his neck briefly before answering. There is a chance that maybe this person is related to Gato personally, and is taking over the business, so to speak, via inheritance. Do we at all know if Gato had any family? Tsunade briefly looked out her window in thought, then turned back to Shikamaru. I'm honestly not sure if he did. I had read over Kakashi's report of that mission before summoning both of you earlier and found nothing, but that idea doesn't sound too unrealistic either. Tsunade gave the theories a run-over in her head before deciding to continue with the briefing. The both of you will be traveling to Wave together. Once you have arrived, you will make contact with Uzumaki Naruto, who will be waiting for you around the border of the bridge outside Wave. At this, Lee's interest perked. Naruto-kun will be joining us. But isn't he training with Jiraiya-sama and not meant to return to Konoha for another half a year? Lee asked, although he could not contain that bit of excitement in his voice. Lee and Naruto saw each other as rivals in a way after what happened with Sasuke, and had numerous spars before he left for his training. The thought of catching up with Naruto again earlier than expected would indeed be great, even though it was for a mission. Lee was dragged out of his thoughts by hearing Tsunade sigh. Well, you see, Apparently, Jiraiya said he has some important matters to handle, and he doesn't want Naruto around to deal with. Seeing as he found out about this mission and the information we have so far, Jiraiya decided to include Naruto as a mandatory team member for this mission. I swear, if this is just all part of some plan for your research, I will beat you to death the next time I see you. Tsunade mused in annoyance to the frog Sanin, but didn't share with the two chunin. Shikamaru will be leading this team. If by chance assistance is needed at all, Naruto has been instructed by Jiraiya to use a toad to send a message back to us for requesting reinforcements. I wouldn't want to send too many shinobi out in case this entire incident is a mere bandit situation. Especially since we are quite low on available shinobi at the moment due to numerous missions. While the payment we received for this mission covered B rank, the honest truth told to us by our client is that the mission can be anywhere from C ranked up to possibly A ranked. Will we need to make contact with the client? Shikamaru asked. Tsunade shook her head. Naruto knows the client personally from Team 7's first mission, and he already has made contact and gathered all the information you will need. If you need to speak to the client once again because the Gaki forgets, I'm sure you will know what to do. Tsunade said. chuckling lightly at the end of the last part. Shikamaru had one more question on his mind, but he had a feeling he knew the answer he was going to receive. Hokage-sama, I would like to make a request on an additional team member on this team for this mission. Tsunade raised an eyebrow but nodded her head to signal Shikamaru to continue. While I am aware you already said you are short on number of available shinobi. For a mission that carries a very large risk of potentially becoming extremely dangerous, we are missing a very vital team member. While it is a smart idea to have a team consisting of a tactician and two very strong offensive fighters, what is the use if one of us, namely Naruto and Lee here, get badly injured or worse, poisoned? As team leader I am responsible for their lives, and I know that we are simply too far from Konoha to get a rapid response rescue if something did happen. What I am asking is that a medical nin is added to the team. Tsunade sighed. She knew very well that Shikamaru would ask this, especially considering what happened to his best friend, Choji and Neji, and even Naruto during his first Chunin mission. Tsunade also knew he was right, and didn't want to have that mistake happen again. Alright Shikamaru, I know who I would trust with such a task, and chances are she is going to be very thankful for it since you just saved her from paperwork which will be coming back to ME again. Sakura usually is more than happy to help Tsunade out with anything, but that doesn't mean she wasn't allowed to hate the task she was lifting from her sensei's shoulders. She read over the medical report once again before signing her name where required, then placed it in the start of a new pile, then almost robotically reached for the next report and began reading. Sakura's office wasn't exactly large, but considering that this was the first office ever appointed to her, she by far didn't complain, especially since it was usually given to the head doctor of the hospital's department. The office contained a small rectangle desk, which contained a small shelf with pencils and other instruments. On top of that shelf was a two-sided photo frame. Inside it was a picture of her parents and herself on the left, and a picture of Team 7 on the right. On the right side of her desk was a lamp. The desk had two seats on the opposite side for addressing patients. There was also a large shelf to her left side filled by numerous well-used medical books that Tsunade had passed to her. On the right side of the room, there was a small coffee machine, which she found always needed repairing from extensive use. To be honest, the whole feeling of having an office to herself at such a young age terrified her, but Tsunade insisted that she would benefit from the experience. Sakura let off a sigh, and then signed the report, while repeating the same process again. Occasionally Sakura would glance at the photo frame, more particularly the Team 7 photo. Usually depending on what mood she was in, she would either have good or bad memories from their time almost reaching 2 years ago. Luckily for her, today was a good memory. She remembered the time when Naruto had somehow convinced Sasuke and herself to attempt to discover a mystery that still hasn't been solved today, the mystery of what was behind Kakashi's mask. They had tried numerous things which resulted in complete failure and partial humiliation as well. Finally they resorted to just asking their sensei up front. The result was what neither of the three predicted: there was another mask behind Kakashi's mask. At first Sakura would claim that was the most humiliating day ever in her life, but now has come to recognize that this was one of the best memories of Team 7. A knock on her door brought her back to reality. "Come in," she called, while quickly signing the next report. She wasn't expecting Tsunade to walk in, especially during the busiest hour of the day, for the Hokage at least. "Tsunade-sama," she asked with clear surprise on her face. Sakura was rewarded with a smile from her sensei. "How are the reports going, Sakura?" Sakura put on her most concealed forced smile possible. "They're going all right. I only just got here a few minutes ago, but they are coming along." Tsunade read her apprentice like a book but decided to tease. "Is that so? I guess then I won't lighten your load then and ask Shizune to go on this mission then." "No, Maya." To say Sakura was embarrassed was an understatement, and refused to look her sensei in the eye. That changed soon however when her sensei began laughing. "Sakura, it's alright, I'm just teasing. You need to work on your fake smiles more if you want to fool old me. Shizune is becoming a veteran in that department. You were practically an open book to me, as always." Sakura decided to at best drop the topic, before she embarrassed herself more. "Would you like some tea? It will help with the sake." Tsunade took a seat and crossed her arms, giving a harsh stare at her apprentice, who says, "I have been drinking sake." "Really, Sakura, I do not drink when on duty." The result was her apprentice meeting her gaze with a smug grin, followed by what appeared to be a long staring contest. "You need to work on your fake scowls, I believe, Tsunade-sama. I suppose some tea would keep me awake," Tsunade said in defeat. Sakura chuckled as she got up and started making Tsunade and herself some tea. "You said something about a mission, Tsunade-sama?" Sakura inquired, as she handed the cup over to her sensei. Tsunade took several sips before answering. "Yes, I would like you to join a team consisting of Nara Shikamaru, Rock Lee, and Uzumaki Naruto." Tsunade chose then to stop and wait for that piece of information to sink into her currently wide-eyed apprentice. Many things flew through Sakura's mind, but she voiced out her biggest question. Naruto. But what a Buddha. Tsunade sighed. Jiraiya apparently has an important issue that he wants to handle without Naruto's presence. Coincidentally, this mission was discovered soon after Jiraiya was trying to find something for Naruto to do. But since the Akatsuki may be after him soon within the next few months, it is too dangerous to leave Naruto alone. Tsunade finished in her head, since she received Kosuke's second letter before arriving at the hospital. Sakura knew her sensei well enough to know when she was hiding something and was about to speak but then quickly hesitated. Tsunade gave her apprentice a questioning gaze. What is wrong, Sakura? Sakura hesitated again, nibbling on her lower lip wondering if it was right to voice what she had done. The file was in her office. Sakura eventually responded, "Is this Todoa with the Kyuubi?" Tsunade almost fell right out of her chair in shock. How the Wendita Sakura, her apprentice was avoiding Tsunade's shocked gaze. After a brief pause to calm herself, Tsunade spoke calmly. Sakura, how do you know about Narutosha? Tsunade voiced the first assumption that came to her head in a rush. He told you. The slight glimpse of hurt flashed over apprentice's eyes, but she shook her head. Sakura had trouble keeping eye contact with Tsunade but she spoke apologetically. I was browsing around in Naruto's medical history by accident while tidying up your office that time I broke my arm, the first time. I was interested to find out about how Naruto was able to have such a ridiculous amount of stamina and how his wounds seemed to heal faster than normal. I honestly thought it was some rare type of Kekkei Genkaya and I just wanted to know him better. I'm sorry Tsunade-sama. Tsunade's mouth was agape, but quickly recovered and sighed. Sakura, what are you apologizing for? It was clearly my fault for leaving that file out in the open. If it makes any difference, I myself looked at my other teammates' medical histories as well but for not finding out about their state of health. I just wanted to know how it was possible for somebody like Orochimaru to exist and if being a pervert was hereditary. However Sakura, I have to ask you this. Sakura finally met eye to eye with her sensei. Did you talk to anybody about this? Sakura shook her head, her hurt eyes being revealed again. Naruto didn't tell either me or Sasuke-kuna so I assumed he really didn't want anybody to know about his burden. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at her apprentice's choice of words, burden. Does that mean? Sakura rarely showed any signs of anger towards her sensei, but the scowl Tsunade was receiving sure was giving a lot of it. Of course I don't think Naruto is a demon. He is my teammate and my friend. Last time I checked, demons do not risk their lives to protect others, nor do they care to help the people around them, even if they are being treated like an outcast. Sakura said, but quickly realized who she was talking to, and averted her eyes to the floor. Before she could mutter her apologies, Tsunade beat her to it. Well said. Sakura was honestly caught off guard and returned her gaze to her sensei slightly shocked, before calming down into a soft smile, and drinking some of her tea. Tsunade decided to bite on her curiosity. That sounded a lot like an apology to my ears though Sakura. Sakura nodded slowly, earning her sensei to shake her head. You are still blaming yourself aren't you? I know you told me not to, but I really just feel that way. You know he never hated you for the way you treated him, as exaggerated as you make it. I won't scold you this time. You know what I told you about this before, is finding out about the Kyuubi why you always have been so quiet when I dropped his name. Sakura nodded earning Tsunade to sigh. I see, my answer to you before still stands though, but if you really feel you want to apologize to him, be my guest. Dismissing the topic Tsunade asked her apprentice, I am sure you have a lot of questions you have wanted to know for some time. Sakura took a moment to adjust to the topic change, but nodded, I have so many, but I feel I should ask Naruto, it's only right if I do. So what is this mission really about Tsunade-sama? Tsunade decided to start from the beginning, telling Sakura about the mission of Wave and then her new discovery. I suppose there is no point in lying to you anymore Sakura. To be honest I thought this was one of Jiraiya's plots to continue his so-called research, until I received this message from a toad on my way to see you. Tsunade lifted a folded paper from one of her pockets and passed it to Sakura. Sakura unfolded the message and recognized the hand written clearly as Jiraiya's. Tsunade, I will keep this brief. Let's say I forgot to attach this letter to you as well with the mission report. My spies have gotten word on the whereabouts of a possible outpost used by the Akatsuki. According to the information my spies have discovered, they have several locations scattered around each country. While I need to investigate this, I don't want to carry the risk of Naruto's being captured if something was to happen. I expect to spend approximately a week to reach the destination and return to Wave. In case I take any longer, I have instructed Naruto to follow your appointed team for the mission back to Konoha. Take care of the Gaki for me, and you will hear from me again soon. Jiraiya. As Sakura read the letter, Tsunade observed her apprentice's expression change numerous times. Once Sakura was finished she glanced up at her sensei puzzled, what is Akatsuki? And what does Jiraiya-sama mean by Naruto's capture? Tsunade finished the rest of her tea in one large gulp then began. Akatsuki is a group of S-class missing nin who has joined together as a group to capture the Jinchuriki. Before Sakura could ask her next question, Tsunade answered, Jinchuriki is basically a name that was made during the early times of the Third Shinobi War, for people who have a biju sealed within themselves. Sakura frowned, clearly disapproving the sound of the word. The thought of labeling somebody like Naruto as a type of weapon or thing was something she detested strongly. However, Sakura chose to say nothing and allowed Tsunade to continue. We still do not know their goals, but we know their objective is not the people themselves, but their tenants. Jiraiya has discovered through his spies though that they have some means of extracting the biju out of the person. Sakura released the breath she was holding in unconsciously, then wondered, but would that relieve the person from their burden? Tsunade shook her head and showed a grim expression. Unfortunately, no, Sakura. You see, since a biju's chakra is so unstable, it requires to be sealed within a newborn child, when, as you know, their chakra coils haven't developed, meaning there is the ability for the coils to change depending on circumstances. Once the child's coils develop, they develop around the biju's chakra, meaning they are constantly relying on it. Tsunade noticed her apprentice's eyes widen and she skin paled to ghostly white. Sakura knew then exactly what would happen then if the biju was successfully extracted from the person. Gee, that means. Sakura couldn't even finish her sentence due to the shock. Tsunade chose to nod her head without giving an answer, although she was growing worried judging by her apprentice's sudden change in mood. He kept this from us. People were hunting for his life, and he didn't tell us. Finally Sakura spoke just above a whisper, Tsunade-sama, how long have they been after Naruto? At first Tsunade was going to lie, but knew better, although she knew her apprentice wasn't going to like what she was about to hear. Quote, Nearing 3 years now. Before the incoming storm of a panicked apprentice could surface, Tsunade quickly barked loudly, however. Then spoke in her normal voice, seeing as her apprentice was choosing to wait, although the noticeable twitching on Sakura's face showed she was growing impatient. Quote, Because of Jiraiya's presence and some unknown factors, they haven't attempted to capture Naruto for the entire time of his training, nor will they attempt to capture him again until several months later, and you shouldn't be mad at him for not telling anybody about his situation. Sakura's eyes widened slightly more, and Tsunade gave a small smile. You're a book. He doesn't want his friends to get involved or hurt for his cause or issues. Since you are his teammate, you should know that better than anybody else. Sakura winced as Tsunade finished her scolding, but nonetheless agreed. Yes, Tsunade-sama, you are right, but 3 years. Sakura shook her head frantically, as if all her musing for the year overwhelmed her. Why? Did he not tell us? Why? What was he trying to prove? That he didn't need help. Why was he so scared to trust Sasuke-kun and me? Was it because of the way I treated him? Why? Tsunade decided not to talk, understanding that Sakura was venting out so many questions that had built up over time. Finally calming, she recomposed, whipping away a stray tear. Sorry, Tsunade-sama. It's fine, Sakura, it's fine. Tsunade said, comfort, not knowing when she came around and patted her apprentice's back, which succeeded in calming her nerves. I am just so angry, but at the same time so confused. I see Naruto's reasons why he didn't tell me, I really do, but at the same time it hurts. People do dumb things to protect those important to them, Sakura. That is something I can speak from experience. Tsunade mused, remembering all the times Jiraiya and even Orochimaru protected her from danger at their own expenses. Sakura slowly nodded her head. I know. I will talk to Naruto when I get the chance to. Tsunade smirked. Talk, you liar. Sakura formed a grin and shrugged. I promise not to hurt him too much. Tsunade gave an amused HMMPH, while glancing up at the clock on the wall. Well, we have been here for almost an hour, and I told your other 2 team members I would be right back in 10 minutes. Not that I think Shikamaru would mind. Hell, he probably is thankful, but the thought of Lee not doing well at anything for an hour is something I don't think is possible. Tsunade patted her apprentice on the back once more in comfort, before gesturing her to stand. We better get going. Sakura obliged, paying one last glance at her desk as she began summarizing all the new information she had just been told, further filling in blank holes in her mind, but at the same time opening up new ones. We are going to have a long talk about this Naruto. Women, why are they so troublesome? Shikamaru thought lazily. She said 10 minutes, yet it has been almost an hour and a half. What in God's name are they doing? Oh well, guess it helps me get to know my other team member better. At this Shikamaru turned his gaze to see Lee in deep concentration. It was surprisingly disturbing to see, considering the miniature guy's usual hyperactiveness and a crazy attitude. After 20 minutes had passed when Tsunade left, Shikamaru noticed a shogi box hidden underneath a stack of papers. With a little bit of convincing, he was able to persuade Lee to a game. Shikamaru was surprised though, when Lee showed that he already had an understanding on how the pieces worked, and knew the purpose to the game. Interest got the better of him, and Shikamaru asked Lee how he knew surprisingly quite a fair bit about shogi. During one of Gai-sensei's matches with his eternal rival, Kakashi-sensei, Gai-sensei was challenged to a match of shogi. During the entire game I had no understanding what was going on at all. So I took it upon myself to find out about how the game worked. It was then that I discovered the true secret to the game. It is all about strategy. Depending on the person's strategy, you are also able to learn a bit about that person's personality. Those that constantly plays on the offensive usually are quite hasty in battle, and usually do not think before they act. People that play on the defensive are the opposite. They think their actions thoroughly, but because of this they lack in courage to act, or act too slow. The issue is trying to understand the opponents that can switch back and forth between these strategies. You for example Shikamaru-kun are such a person. To say Shikamaru was amused by that insight was a severe understatement. I will never think of this person as a fool ever again, at least not all the time. The pair had played one game so far, which to no surprise Shikamaru won, but that wasn't to say it was a walk in the park for his victory. While true to Lee's theory, Lee himself was an offensive type player, but he was occasionally switching tactics when an opportunity was available, which did cause Shikamaru to get his queen captured. 10 minutes into their second game, the door opened revealing Tsunade and Sakura. Their expressions were neutral at first, but when they saw what was happening in front of them, both of them went agape. I had a shogi board in this office. No scratch that, Lee is playing shogi. Were some of the thoughts passing through both Kunoichi's minds. Lee was completely oblivious to the matter however and looked up from the board at the newcomers. Ah, hello again Sakura-san. It is good to know we have one of the best medic nin in Konoha excluding Hokage-sama joining us on this mission during the springtime of our youth. Lee beamed. Sakura had long got used to the constant praises she received from her patients and fellow shinobi, at least she does not blush in embarrassment too much now. Thank you Lee-san. Sakura said, still slightly baffled by his addition of youth at the end of his praise. Shikamaru in turn looked back at Lee for a moment. How can he be so intelligent one second, then become a complete baka the next? At least Naruto was as consistent. Tsunade cleared her throat and returned to her seat behind her desk, taking a quick glance at the shogi board to see who was winning before sitting down. She looked up at her chosen team for this mission. Lee and Shikamaru were now standing side by side on Sakura's right, giving the Hokage their complete attention. Does this team now appear satisfactory to your eyes Shikamaru? Tsunade inquired, almost daring the Nara to object. Shikamaru nodded. Indeed it does Hokage-sama. With the addition of Sakura on the team, if the situation does become dire, at least now I know we have great medical support, as well as another strong fighter if needed. Sakura tried as best as she could to resist smiling, but the corner of her mouth twitched upwards against her will. Is there anything else we need to know before we leave for the mission Hokage-sama? Lee asked, getting eager to finally begin his first mission as a chunin. Once Lee asked his question, Sakura's face returned to neutral and she shared a brief look with Tsunade, which went unnoticed by both Shikamaru and Lee. Other than you will be leaving this late afternoon, no, there is nothing else. Please give my regards to Naruto though when you see him. Tsunade said a bit harsher than she intended at the start, but only Sakura noticed and understood what Tsunade truly was implying. Flashback A Hokage Tower, 15 minutes before present. Sakura and Tsunade were not far from the office now. After the briefing on the way, not much else was discussed, until Sakura had one question she was cursing herself for not asking earlier. Tsunade-sama, Sakura said hesitantly. This had made Tsunade stop and look eye to eye with her apprentice. After that brief exchange of glances, Tsunade made a small detour into the Sandame's old supply room, and turned the light on, then made sure nobody was listening in before turning to Sakura. What is on your mind Sakura? She asked waiting patiently. Sakura took a few more moments to ponder what to say, then looked back at her sensei. What do we tell Shikamaru and Lee-san? I mean do they need to know about Naru? No, they don't need to know. Tsunade said in a tone that left no room for argument to any normal person. Unfortunately for Tsunade, Sakura wasn't one of those people. But Tsunade-sama, Tsunade's sigh forced Sakura to stop. Sakura, the Sandame made a law saying that nobody was allowed to discuss what truly happened to the Kyuubi in public, and forbade it that the younger generations such as yourself knew the truth. Anybody that broke this law initially was executed. Sakura gasped, but Tsunade continued. The only person that is allowed to tell the truth publicly is Naruto and only Naruto. Akura broke her gaze and nodded, although she clearly was not satisfied with that answer. Tsunade let out yet another sigh, then decided to add, Buddha. Sakura looked back up at her sensei. If I know him for what he truly is and acts, similar to say, yourself. He will be stubborn till the end if something involving the Kyuubi or Akatsuki does happen on this mission. He will most likely try to cover it up for the team's safety. If, and only if the situation comes to that, I am giving you permission to let the others know about Naruto. Sakura looked hard into her sensei's glass-shattering gaze. She knew how serious her sensei was being about this. Sakura returned the favor with the same gaze back to let her sensei know how serious she was being with this as well. You have my word, Hokage-sama. End flashback. Shikamaru gave a quick glance at both of his teammates, noticing Sakura was in deep thought, but chose to speak anyway, since it would be too troublesome to ask what was on her mind. We will meet in front of the gates at sunset, we will move out then. We should be able to make it to Wave by tomorrow late afternoon, assuming we have a brief 3 to 5 hour break during the night before continuing. Shikamaru said, secretly thanking God he wouldn't have to repeat it again, as Sakura was paying attention to him once he started talking. A chorus of highs were heard between the two other team members, as they all exited the room to get ready for their mission. Lee quickly began packing a few of his belongings in his pack. His choices of outfits involved his traditional green spandex, along with 2 spares, a summer spandex with short sleeves for his arms and cutoffs at his knees. And finally a winter spandex which used thicker materials in case it was cold. Guy-sensei always told him it was good to carry more just in case. As for weapons, Lee prepared the normal set of kunai, however instead of carrying an extra holster, he replaced it with his nunchucks, which he had trained extensively with. Tenten and Guy trained him with using them in combination with his strong taijutsu before he re-entered the Chunin exams. Then Lee brought his gaze down to his other tool on his bed. During the preparing period for the 3rd exam, Tenten insisted Lee add an additional weapon to his inventory to master. This is when Tenten presented him with a double-edged spear. The spear itself was more common for a samurai to use instead of a ninja, however Tenten lectured Lee that the weapon was similar in a way with the nunchucks. Meaning they required a great understanding of martial arts to be effective in battle. Using the weapon only for impaling your opponent by far wasn't the only thing it was effective for, especially for somebody of Lee's caliber. The most unique feature about the weapon was that the spear posed the ability to retract to a mere 1/5 of its original size, hiding the edged blades on its sides, making it safe to hold while retracted. The mechanism to extend the spear was by pressing 2 buttons in the center simultaneously. Once done, the spear would extend to its true size, being 6 feet in length within a second. This meant if the wielder was not careful he could potentially cut, or worse, impale themselves if they extended it while holding it at a wrong angle. Lee almost impaled himself in the chest before Tenten stopped him. That had Lee earned Tenten giving him a severe scolding, and also what surprised him and to an extent, Tenten as well, was a solid punch in the head from none other than Neji, for his near-fatal mistake. Attaching the spear to his utility belt, he then finished packing any food supplies he needed. Lee figured that since they were staying in Wave during most, if not all of the mission, he packed enough to last him the day journey, and placed his water canteen next to the supplies. Finally Lee attached his traditional weights to his legs and arms. It was then that he remembered the conversation he had earlier with Sakura, and her interest in beginning using a set. Lee walked into the living room turned to training room of his apartment, where he had all of his training equipment including old weights. As a congratulations gift for making his recovery from the Chunin exam incident with Gaara, the rest of Team Guy chipped in and brought him a special set of weights for the arms, that had the ability to change how much they weighed on the fly. All it required was a single sheep seal, making contact with the weight you wanted to adjust with your palm, and then channeling chakra to increase or decrease the weight. This is where Team Guy forgot the fact that Lee cannot use seals. Lee didn't mind at all for the hiccup, and in fact was eternally grateful for the gift, even though he couldn't use it. However, these weights were beyond valuable for someone with what many shinobi describe as perfect chakra control, the very thing Sakura is known for. With these she could change them to anything from a mere pound up to 150 pounds, at no extra expense. That's not to say the cost of these weights alone were equal to roughly 5 to 6 sets of different weights. Picking up the weights, he eyed them closer. The weights were very similar in appearance of a traditional bracelet, colored a golden yellow tone, making the untrained eye simply write them off as worthless, which very much was opposite from the truth. The only other eye-catching feature was the small white, squared decoration in the center of the weight, where they would display the kanji for the amount they were set to. Placing the contents at the top of his pack, Lee took one last look around his apartment, sparing an extra second on a framed photo of Team Guy on the wall of his bedroom. The picture was taken after their first C-rank mission together. The picture had Guy standing tall in the back giving his nearly impossible shining grin, with Lee in the middle giving a nice guy pose. Neji had his arms crossed and had a neutral expression on his face to Lee's left. Tenten had a wide grin, and posed with a kunai being balanced on the tip of her finger on her right hand. Everyone, wish me luck, and I will make you all proud for believing in me and helping me get to where I am now. Lee thought as he made his way out the door of his apartment. Sakura, unlike the other members, went to the marketplace. She needed to stock up on medical herbs for the mission before packing her personal equipment. Through extensive reading, she understood that there were several common herbs that can be used and mixed to combat nearly most traditional poisons used by shinobi and bandits. Assuming the medic nin gets their diagnosis correct on the type of poison ailed on the patient, mixing the correct herbs can cure the poison within minutes. The problem was though how quick the medic nin could determine the type of poisoning, and how long the patient had been suffering from the poison. The longer it took, the more the ailment would spread throughout the patient's body, meaning more herbs would have to be used. The more disturbing fact to this as well, was the patient's health deteriorating over long periods of time from exposure to the poison. Sakura herself had treated shinobi that had returned to Konoha while exposed to the poison for days. The results was numerous treatments, as well as being bedridden for weeks. The pharmacist greeted Sakura as she entered the store. "Greetings Sakura-sama, what can I do for you today?" she asked. Sakura flushed in embarrassment and replied, as I keep telling you, just Sakura is fine." The pharmacist nodded, although Sakura knew she would still call her Sakura-sama. Sakura still hadn't quite become accustomed to being idolized yet by other villagers or fellow ninja. It was a thought that she honestly expected to never happen throughout her life. That quickly changed however after her first official mission as a medic nin. The town of that mission consisted of hundreds of civilians that lived a few miles away from Konoha. Some sick bastard thought it would be funny to poison the town's water supply, causing a widespread exposure to the people and animals of the town to a poison. The poison itself wasn't lethal. It did however cause symptoms equivalent to the flu, along the addition of mild hallucinations and general lack of energy. Tsunade herself was going to go and help the town, but the elders were practically breathing down her neck denying it. Seeing as the other medic nins were all out on missions, she turned to now their only hope, Sakura. Sakura traveled together with Shikamaru to the town, and the sight she saw was something she wasn't going to forget for the rest of her life. The town was in a complete state of disaster. Children were crying and trying to embrace an invisible being, dogs were bearing fangs at inanimate objects, and numerous elderly people were bedridden. She felt tears fall when she had learnt that the town had already suffered numerous losses not only from the elderly but even from young children. The old Sakura before becoming apprenticed to the Godime would have cried and done nothing, because deep down she knew she could do nothing. However, the new Sakura was by far not incapable, and quickly wiped away her tears and went straight to work on creating a vaccine. That was the first non-traditional poison Sakura had ever cured. By the end of the day, Sakura had cured over several hundred villagers and pets in the town. Sakura didn't stop there though. She then began working out a way to remove the poisoning from the water supply, without making the water unhealthy to drink. It took a bit of convincing from weary villagers, but after Sakura had given a demonstration by drinking the water herself and showed no signs of the poisonous effects, the villagers began drinking again. The bastard was never caught, but Sakura swore to herself that when the person was found, she would personally give them a taste of the pain they had caused to that town. It was only days after that mission where there were numerous talks and praises about her in the village. She even heard the occasional praise of the next Tsunade come her way every now and then. A few days later came the idolizers from nurses and new shinobi alike. It had been 3 months since that mission, and being considered an idol was still something Sakura was coming to terms with. After she had brought the herbs she needed to the desk, and paid for them, Sakura sealed them into her special sealing scroll that contained her other medical tools which she carried in her weapons pouch at all times, then bid her farewells to the pharmacist and began her journey home to begin packing. She paused down the street not long though at the recollection of what happened earlier in her office. It appeared her wish of wanting to see Naruto earlier than before was being granted to her surprise, only she felt less ecstatic about it than before. I think your forehead is getting bigger again. Sakura shot her eyes up from the ground to see the person that just teased her and groaned, "What do you want, Ino?" The platinum blonde-haired Kunoichi's eyebrow rose, "Just picking up herbs of course, since I am a medic nin too you know." Sakura chuckled while pointing her thumb behind her. "The pharmacist is back there. I am here. Open it and tell me what's up Sakura." Sakura frowned at her best friend but explained the mission, ironing out mentions of the Kyuubi in her summary, as she had done whenever Naruto was brought up. Ino's eye widened, but a grin formed. "So you are catching up with Naruto. That's great then." "Yeah." Ino's lone visible blue eye narrowed on her friend. "Don't tell me those stupid thoughts are still lurking around inside your billboard of a forehead Sakura." Sakura cursed the day she opened up with Ino about that. They could be. "I swear you are hopeless." "Shut up." Sakura didn't know when she turned and walked with Ino back to the pharmacist. "What do you think I should do, Ino?" Ino clicked her tongue while opening the door to let them back in. Get over it, of course, you idiot. Despite how simple it sounded, the actual carrying out of the action was impossible to Sakura's will. Ino frowned while going through the aisles, grabbing the herbs she needed, with her silent follower behind her. I treated Choji and Shikamaru the same in a way too, Sakura. Did you ever hit them though? No. Ino watched her friend's down demeanor deepen and she shook her head while continuing. That doesn't mean I didn't give them a lot of flack though. So what did you do? Well, I didn't sulk like you have been about it. I simply chose to accept I was being stupid, and made it up by treating them the way I should have originally. But Ino, he wasn't even here. And what stopped you from writing to him? Hokage-sama surely would have been happy to pass along any message, surely. And don't even say, he could have wrote to me. This is Naruto we are talking about after all. Ino formed a smile, while bringing her items to the counter. It has worked for me, you should give it a go. Sakura gave a small grin. I guess I will try. Ino opened the door to allow them both out, while giving her friend a nudge. Hey, cheer up forehead, you should be happy you're seeing Naruto earlier than expected. Don't you lie to me and say you haven't missed his loud shouts. Sakura shrugged while forming a more genuine smile. I have missed him. You should get him something. Huh, you know. Something to plant a smile on his face. It will make you feel better too. Sakura blinked for a few moments and shrugged. What do I get him? Ino groaned while face-palming at her friend's stupidity, and childishly flicked Sakura's forehead. You're his teammate. You should know the loud-mouthed shrimp better than me. Ino gave it a second's worth of thought and voiced her answer like it was a fact. Ramen forehead. Isn't it obvious? Sakura rubbed her neck sheepishly. Oh. Well, best of luck on your mission, Sakura. And be happy for God's sakes. Naruto will probably be surprised to see you. Thanks, Ino. Ino then left Sakura on the street, while Sakura nodded her head and decided she would follow Ino's advice on bringing to Naruto the food he loved the most. She didn't get far though when she caught glimpse of Guy, who appeared to have, well, Sakura didn't know what else to call it than garbage, in his mouth. The fact that he was walking around on his hands instead of feet didn't help either. She could have sworn she heard mutters coming from the man, cursing a former sensei she was familiar with. Sakura knew better, but her interest was killing her and she approached Guy. Meanwhile, Guy on that matter was struggling to find a way to place the garbage in the bin, considering that his head was a mere foot from the ground, and the bin was 4 feet tall. Guy-sensei, what are you doing? Sakura asked, when she had noticed that what was in Guy's mouth was a very old and rotted banana peel. She had to turn her head in disgust. Usually Sakura had matured enough to avoid using what she referred to as girly terms, but only one thought came, ew. By this time Guy had worked out some bizarre way to get the rubbish in the bin and then came back to his feet before addressing Sakura. Your sensei indeed is a slippery one, Sakura. He won in our match of hide and seek, and as part of my failure, I am cleaning up this marketplace with nothing but my teeth. Guy beamed, unbelievably happy, even though his task ahead was extremely revolting. Something tells me, Kakashi-sensei made himself scarce when you were distracted, and you assumed he was challenging you to a children's game of hide and seek, you idiot. Sakura mused. I see, was all she could muster up, trying as best as she could to keep her face neutral, although it was clearly turning to disgust. Guy was oblivious, however. Your sensei better prepare himself though, because I will win in our rematch. Guy shouted at the end, giving his traditional nice guy pose. Sakura covered her mouth, and her face unconsciously shook rapidly. Guy didn't seem to notice that he had a bit of garbage stuck between his usually metallic-like shining teeth. Blah, that is repulsive. I got to go. Sorry Guy-sensei, I have a mission that I am leaving for soon. And at that she turned her head and almost got into a jog, desperately trying to flush that horrid image out of her mind. Good luck on your mission. May your youth shine your way till the end. Guy beamed. When the sight of Guy's teeth finally flushed from her mind, she returned to her previous thoughts. I wonder how long it has been since Naruto has eaten ramen. Knowing him and his endless bickering he gave on missions, I would say he would downright refuse to eat other ramen other than the store that only makes real ramen, as he used to put it. Sakura could not resist the silent chuckle. Seeing the familiar small boxed store with its fire-red kanji was all she needed to know she was at Ichiraku's. Now, what was it he said in his constant praises of this place? Oh yes, miso pork was the ramen of ramen. Sakura mused, while now for the first time today, finally felt the long overdue joy of seeing her teammate again.